Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun!
The soft rustle of fabric echoed through the dimly lit bedroom as fingers traced over the delicate beadwork adorning the hem of a sapphire blue gown. Ryder's eyes, still red-rimmed from days of mourning, fixated on the garment spread across his bed. It was his mother's favorite dress, the one she'd worn to countless formal events and family gatherings. Now it served as a bittersweet reminder of her absence. With trembling hands, Ryder lifted the gown, marveling at how the light caught the intricate sequins. He could almost smell his mother's signature perfume lingering on the fabric. A lump formed in his throat as memories flooded back. Her infectious laughter, her warm embraces, and the way her eyes lit up whenever she wore this particular dress.
"I miss you so much, Mom,"
he whispered, clutching the gown to his chest. As the days passed, Ryder found himself drawn to the closet where he'd carefully hung the blue gown. It became a source of comfort, a tangible connection to his mother. Sometimes, he'd sit on the floor of his room, running his fingers over the silky material, lost in thought. One evening, as the setting sun cast long shadows across his bedroom, Ryder stood before the full-length mirror, holding the gown up against his body. He'd never given much thought to women's clothing before, but something about this dress called to him. It wasn't just about his mother anymore. There was a stirring deep within him, a curiosity he couldn't ignore. With shaking hands, he slipped off his t-shirt and jeans. Taking a deep breath, he carefully stepped into the gown, pulling it up over his shoulders. The zipper proved tricky, but after a few attempts, he managed to fasten it. Ryder turned to face his reflection, and his breath caught in his throat. The gown hugged his body in ways he never expected, accentuating curves he didn't know he had. For the first time in weeks, a small smile tugged at the corners of his mouth.
"Is this me?"
he whispered, twirling slowly. The skirt flared out, creating a mesmerizing swirl of blue fabric. Something clicked into place, a puzzle piece he didn't know was missing. Over the next few days, Ryder found himself returning to the mirror, each time staying a little longer in the gown. He began to experiment, adding a touch of his mother's makeup, trying different hairstyles. With each transformation, he felt more at peace, more himself. It was during one of these sessions that the name came to him.
"Valerie,"
he said softly, testing it out. It felt right, like a warm embrace from within. Valerie. That's who he saw in the mirror now. Not Ryder in a dress, but Valerie, confident, beautiful, and finally whole. The decision to venture outside as Valerie didn't come easily. For weeks, for Valerie had begun to think of herself with feminine pronouns, practiced walking in heels, perfecting her makeup, and working on her voice. Finally, on a crisp evening, she gathered her courage and stepped out into the world. The neighborhood was quiet as Valerie made her way down the sidewalk, her heart pounding with each click of her heels against the pavement. She'd chosen a modest black dress for her first outing, accented with a blue scarf that reminded her of her mother's gown. As she walked, Valerie noticed an older woman tending to her garden. Their eyes met, and the woman smiled warmly. "Good evening, dear," she called out. "Lovely night for a walk, isn't it?" Valerie's voice caught in her throat for a moment before she managed to respond. "It certainly is. Have a wonderful evening." The interaction, brief as it was, left her feeling elated. She'd been seen as herself, as Valerie, and the world hadn't come crashing down. Emboldened by this small success, Valerie began to venture out more frequently. She visited a local cafe, browsed bookstores, and even attended a community art class. With each outing, her confidence grew, and so did her certainty that this was who she was meant to be. However, the double life was taking its toll. At home, she was still Ryder to her family, her father, older sister, and younger brother. The weight of her secret pressed heavily on her shoulders, making family dinners and casual conversations an exercise in careful word choice and constant vigilance. One evening, as Valerie sat at her vanity, carefully removing her makeup after a day out, she heard a knock at her bedroom door. Panic surged through her as she realized she hadn't changed out of her dress.
Ryder, can I come in?
It was her sister, Emma.
Just a minute,
Valerie called out, her voice higher than usual. She scrambled to her closet, frantically searching for something to throw on over her dress. The door opened before she could change. Emma stood in the doorway, her eyes widening as she took in the scene before her. Her brother in a dress, face half covered in makeup remover. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Emma stepped into the room and closed the door behind her.
Ryder,
she said softly. I think we need to talk. Valerie sank onto the bed, her heart racing.
Emma, I can explain.
Emma sat beside her, taking her hand. You don't have to explain anything if you're not ready, but I want you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what. Tears welled up in Valerie's eyes as she looked at her sister. I'm not Ryder, she whispered. I'm Valerie. This is who I am, who I've always been, but never knew how to express. Emma pulled her into a tight hug. Valerie, she said, testing out the name. It suits you. They talked for hours that night, Valerie sharing her journey of self-discovery, her fears, and her hopes for the future. Emma listened, asked questions, and offered unwavering support. You need to tell Dad and Jake, Emma said gently as the night wore on. They love you, Valerie. It might take some time for them to understand, but they'll come around. Valerie nodded, knowing her sister was right. The thought of coming out to the rest of her family filled her with equal parts terror and hope. But with Emma's support, she felt stronger, more capable of facing whatever lay ahead. The next morning, Valerie woke with a sense of purpose. She carefully selected an outfit, a modest blouse and skirt combination that felt true to herself without being overwhelming for her family. As she applied her makeup, she rehearsed what she would say, trying to find the right words to express her truth. When she descended the stairs, she found her father and brother already at the breakfast table. Emma, true to her word, was there as well, offering a reassuring smile. Good morning, Valerie said softly, her voice trembling slightly. Her father looked up, his coffee mug freezing halfway to his lips as he took in her appearance. Jake's fork clattered to his plate. Ryder? Her father's voice was a mix of confusion and concern. What's going on? Valerie took a deep breath, her hands clasped tightly in front of her to hide their shaking.
Dad, Jake, there's something I need to tell you. Something I've been struggling with for a long time.
She moved to sit at the table, feeling the weight of their gazes upon her. Emma reached out and squeezed her hand encouragingly.
I'm transgender,
Valerie said, the words rushing out in a breath.
I'm a woman.
My name is Valerie. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. Valerie's heart pounded in her chest as she waited for a response. Any response. Her father set down his mug slowly, his brow furrowed.
I don't understand,
he said finally.
Is this because of your mother? Are you trying to replace her somehow?
Valerie shook her head emphatically. No, Dad, this isn't about Mom, not really. It's about me. I've always felt different, like I was living a life that wasn't truly mine. When I put on Mom's dress, it was like everything finally made sense. I saw myself, the real me, for the first time. Jake, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, spoke up.
But you're my brother. How can you be a sister?
I'm still the same person, Jake, Valerie said gently. I still love the same things, have the same memories. I'm just being honest about who I am. Her father ran a hand through his hair, sighing heavily.
This is a lot to take in, Valerie. I don't know what to say.
You don't have to say anything right now, Dad, Emma interjected. Just listen. Try to understand. Over the next few hours, Valerie opened up to her family. She shared her fears, her hopes, and her journey of self-discovery. There were tears, from all of them, and moments of confusion and frustration. But underneath it all, there was love. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow through the kitchen windows, Valerie's father reached across the table and took her hand.
I can't pretend I understand everything,
he said, his voice rough with emotion.
But you're my child, and I love you. We'll figure this out together.
Jake, who had been quiet for much of the conversation, suddenly stood up and walked around the table. Without a word, he wrapped his arms around Valerie in a fierce hug.
You're not losing a brother,
Valerie whispered to him. You're gaining a sister who can kick your butt at video games just as well as before. A choked laugh escaped Jake as he pulled back, wiping at his eyes.
We'll see about that, sis.
The word, so casually spoken, brought fresh tears to Valerie's eyes. She looked around at her family, her father's worried but loving gaze, Emma's proud smile, Jake's tentative acceptance, and felt a weight lift from her shoulders. This was just the beginning of a long journey, she knew. There would be challenges ahead, medical decisions, legal name changes, and the daunting task of coming out to the rest of the world. But, for the first time, Valerie felt truly hopeful about the future. As the family began to clear the table, a sense of normalcy settling over them, despite the life-changing conversation, Valerie excused herself for a moment. She climbed the stairs to her room, where her mother's blue gown hung in the closet. Gently, she touched the fabric, a bittersweet smile on her lips. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered, "for everything." In that moment, Valerie could almost feel her mother's presence, wrapping her in a warm embrace of love and acceptance. She knew, deep in her heart, that her mother would have been proud of her courage to live authentically. With renewed determination, Valerie returned downstairs to her family. They had a lot to talk about, a lot to plan. But for now, they were together, united in love and the promise of support. As she rejoined them in the kitchen, helping to wash the dishes and falling into familiar patterns of teasing and laughter, Valerie felt a sense of peace wash over her. This was her family, and this was her life. Not perfect, not without its challenges, but undeniably, beautifully hers. The blue gown that had started her journey would always hold a special place in her heart, a symbol of both her mother's love and her own transformation. But Valerie knew that the real changes, the ones that mattered most, were happening right here, in the everyday moments with her family. As the evening wound down, Valerie found herself sitting on the porch swing, gazing up at the stars. Her father joined her, settling down beside her with a soft groan.
"Your mother loved looking at the stars,"
he said, after a moment of comfortable silence.
"She always said they reminded her that there's so much more to the universe than what we can see."
Valerie nodded, feeling a lump form in her throat. "I miss her so much, Dad." He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close.
"I know, sweetheart. I miss her too. But you know what? I think she'd be incredibly proud of you right now. It takes a lot of courage to be true to yourself."
They sat there for a while longer, the gentle creaking of the swing and the distant chirping of crickets, the only sounds breaking the night's stillness. As Valerie leaned against her father's shoulder, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. The road ahead might be challenging, but she knew she wouldn't have to walk it alone. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of change and adjustment. Valerie began the process of legally changing her name, researched hormone therapy options, and slowly started to build a wardrobe that reflected her true self. Her family, true to their word, stood by her every step of the way. Emma became her fashion consultant, helping her navigate the intricacies of women's clothing and offering makeup tips. Jake, after some initial awkwardness, found ways to include Valerie in their usual brother-sister activities, proving that their bond transcended gender. Her father, though still struggling to understand fully, made a visible effort. He stumbled over pronouns sometimes, accidentally calling her son out of habit, but he always corrected himself with a rueful smile. He even accompanied Valerie to her first appointment with a gender therapist, sitting quietly in the waiting room, a silent pillar of support. As Valerie became more comfortable in her identity, she began to consider how to come out to the wider world. Her job, her friends, the neighbors. There were so many people who still knew her as Ryder. The thought was daunting, but she knew it was a necessary step in living authentically. She decided to start with her closest friends. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, she invited them over for a barbecue with her family's blessing. As her friends arrived, Valerie felt her nerves spike, but the warm hugs and familiar banter helped ease her anxiety. When everyone had arrived and settled in the backyard with plates of food, Valerie cleared her throat. "I have something important to tell you all," she began, her voice wavering slightly. Her friends fell silent, sensing the gravity of the moment. Valerie took a deep breath and continued. "I'm transgender. My name is Valerie now, and I use she, her pronouns." For a moment, there was silence. Then, one of her friends stood up and wrapped her in a tight hug. "Thank you for trusting us with this," she said. "You're so brave, Valerie." One by one, her friends expressed their support, asking questions and offering words of encouragement. There were a few awkward moments, a few well-intentioned but clumsy comments, but overall, the acceptance was overwhelming. As the afternoon wore on, the atmosphere relaxed. Valerie found herself laughing and joking with her friends, feeling more like herself than she ever had before. She caught her father's eye across the yard, and he gave her a proud smile and a thumbs up. That evening, as she helped clean up, Valerie felt a profound sense of gratitude. She knew that not everyone in her situation was fortunate enough to have such a supportive network of family and friends. She made a silent promise to herself to use her privilege and experiences to help others in the trans community whenever she could. The following Monday, Valerie took another big step. She came out at work. She had arranged a meeting with her supervisor and HR representative, feeling a mix of nervousness and determination as she explained her situation. To her relief, they were understanding and supportive. They assured her that the company had policies in place to protect against discrimination and offered to help facilitate her transition in the workplace. They discussed practical matters like updating her email and nameplate, and how to announce the change to her colleagues. As she left the meeting, Valerie felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had feared losing her job, facing discrimination, or being treated differently. While she knew there might still be challenges ahead, this initial acceptance gave her hope. The next few months were a period of adjustment for everyone. Valerie began hormone therapy, watching with a mixture of excitement and awe as her body slowly began to align more closely with her true self. She experimented with different styles of clothing, finding joy in expressing herself authentically. There were difficult moments, of course. Some distant relatives struggled to accept her transition. She occasionally encountered confusion or hostility from strangers. But for every negative experience, there seemed to be multiple positive ones. A compliment on her outfit from a coworker, a heartfelt conversation with an old friend, or a simple moment of being gendered correctly by a cashier. Throughout it all, Valerie's family remained her rock. They celebrated her victories, comforted her during setbacks, and fiercely defended her to anyone who dared to express bigotry. Their love and acceptance gave her the strength to face each new day with courage and optimism. As the 1-year anniversary of her coming out approached, Valerie found herself reflecting on the journey she had undertaken. She thought about the scared, confused person she had been, trying on her mother's dress in secret. She marveled at how far she had come, how much she had grown. To mark the occasion, her family organized a small celebration. As Valerie looked around at the smiling faces of her loved ones, she felt a surge of emotion. She raised her glass, her eyes shining with unshed tears.
"A year ago, I was terrified to show you all who I really am," she said.
"I thought I might lose everything. Instead, I gained so much more than I ever imagined. Thank you all for loving me, for supporting me, for seeing me." Her father stood up, placing a hand on her shoulder.
"We're the lucky ones, Valerie,"
he said, his voice thick with emotion.
"We get to see you truly happy, truly yourself. Your mother would be so proud of the woman you've become."
As the evening wound down, Valerie found herself once again on the porch swing, this time joined by Emma. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars come out. "You know," Emma said finally, "I always wanted a sister." Valerie laughed softly. "Well, here I am. Better late than never, right?" Emma nudged her playfully. "Seriously, though, I'm so proud of you, Val. You've shown incredible strength and grace this past year." Valerie leaned her head on her sister's shoulder. "I couldn't have done it without you. Without all of you." As they sat there, Valerie thought about the blue gown that had started it all. It still hung in her closet, a cherished memento of both her mother and her journey. But it no longer defined her. She was Valerie now, in every aspect of her life, and she was finally, truly at peace with herself. The future stretched out before her, full of possibilities. There would be more challenges, more milestones to reach, more growth to experience. But Valerie was ready to face it all, secure in the knowledge of who she was and surrounded by the love of her family. As the night deepened and the sisters eventually headed inside, Valerie paused at the threshold, looking back at the starry sky. She smiled, feeling her mother's love wrap around her like a warm embrace.
Thank you,
She whispered to the night.
for helping me find my way home.
Thanks for watching, my girlies. Be sure to check out Patreon for more.